Hey, good morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are. Welcome to the stream today. We're really excited to have Aditya Oberai joining us. He's going to be talking to us about a simpler serverless local development experience with Appwrite. So I'm really excited to see this because who doesn't want that type of thing? So let me bring him on here. Hey, Aditya, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Daniel. How are you?
Pretty good. About halfway through my day, so.
I think that sounds great. If I'm honest, I was at a different meetup earlier today, another open source meetup happening in Bangalore, and I mentioned to a few folks that I'm going to be at a live stream at this point, and I got a few looks. Let's just say that. Uh, just because people looked at their watch and realized what I was talking about.
Well, we're glad to have you. We're definitely a global community, so thanks for joining us.
No, it's my pleasure. I think serverless is one of those spaces that I love talking about. Incidentally, I'm going to be at a serverless conference later this week as well. And so I'm actually really happy to be here with you.
Fantastic. Awesome. So we do have, this is a live show, so we've got live chat if you want to answer that as you're going. If any questions are missed, I'll bring them up at the end, if that's cool with you.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Awesome.
Yeah, I guess we can get going in that case with a little bit about what we were going to talk about. But I feel like I'm going to reverse the tables here. I'm going to ask you a few questions before I really get down to sharing what I was going to show for this topic. And that's mainly because I think we were chatting and you mentioned that you might be new to Appwrite as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've actually never heard of it until I saw this session. So.
Oh, I feel like in that case, you're the perfect host because it's going to be a good way for us to kind of really introduce this here, right? So before I kind of jump into that, can you confirm for me if you've heard about what a backend as a service platform could be? Is that something you've heard about in the past?
Yeah, I have. It seemed kind of more like very marketing heavy to me, to be honest with you. I wonder how much of it is marketing versus like an actual thing. Answering your question with a question.
I know, and I feel like you're on a good line there, if I'm honest, right? Because the moment we answered this, you're going to know exactly what Appwrite means. And so I'm sure when we talk to people who are watching the live stream right now, a number of us are going to be developers here as well, right? Some of us could be web developers, some of us could be mobile developers. I'm sure we've all worked on different kind of applications as well. Now, as someone who's been building applications delivered over the internet, personally, I think there are so many applications that I've worked on which have a very consistent set of components. Um, a lot of applications, in fact, anything that you really put out there in the real world, you're probably going to have authentication, login, registration, stuff like that, right? You're probably going to have a database. You might have storage buckets implemented in your application if you're dealing with files. And there are a number of services of this sort, which every single application has. You'll probably have an API to process any logic that you might need to, and so on. And so when you really look at all of these components together over a larger number of applications, like for example, if you've worked on 5, 10, 15, 20 applications, and this number could increase for a lot of builders, you realize that there's a lot of stuff that you're constantly implementing, constantly creating, and it's all repetitive, right? You're going to have a similar login system in each application, if not the same, but something similar. But you're spending all of that time implementing these services on your own, time that you could actually spend working on your product, but because you're going through all these chores and setting up all these components, it does take away a lot of time and effort. And so in the past, there were a few platforms like Parse platform from the Facebook team. We've had Firebase from Google, which is now, of course, owned by Google. It was initially its own organization. And what they really did was that they built these set of they brought together these set of tools in one single platform that let you quickly set up authentication, databases, storage. Some of them had an analytics offering, some of them offered serverless functions as a service, and so on. And together, they were basically giving you a packaged backend that you just had to consume. And that's what a backend as a service platform really is. It's a set of backend services packaged, available for you, that are pre-built, that you just need to consume. And so Appwrite is a modern backend as a service platform, which has offerings for authentication, databases, storage, functions. There is a service that lets you get real-time events across your project. There is a messaging service if you want to implement and integrate different offerings for push notifications, emails, SMSs within your application, and so on. And Appwrite's actually really cool because it's open source. I think that has allowed us, of course, to get feedback and critiquing and support from the community across the world. Because Appwrite's initial development was actually done based on the way it really started was that it was built as a backend for an actual real world tool, and then it was separated out into its own package. It does aim and intend to solve real world problems. And so things like security, performance are things being thought about from the get-go. They've been important core tenets from day one. And of course, the benefit of being open source is also that, see, we've got a great community all around the world now. And that's, I think, always just wonderful to have. So it's actually a really cool platform here. In fact, I'm going to probably bring up my screen now. If anyone wants to learn about it.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
StreamYard to the right, actually. So just as a little disclaimer, if I look towards the right, it just means I'm looking at StreamYard. That's the key. I am just going to bring up my screen now.
All right. Yeah, I will bump this, and I can bump myself if you want me to come back on. Happy to continue conversation.
Yeah. I can talk about this as we go forward, and eventually we're going to definitely hit that point where we'll be building as well, right? So as I mentioned, Appwrite is a backend as a service, which offers a number of different products such as authentication, databases, storage, functions, messaging, and real time. And because it's open source, it's also self-hostable. We do also have a cloud managed offering that's available. Now, coming to the topic of our live stream today, which is about local development with Appwrite functions. I did mention serverless earlier because Appwrite has a functions as a service offering that lets you create serverless functions, deploy them to Appwrite, whether it's your self-hosted edition or whether it's our cloud managed solution, and run them. It's as simple. It's a quick process. These are small, these are granular, but they are pretty effective and powerful. Now, one thing that we announced very, very recently, actually, as a part of our a week where we had a number of announcements and launches called Appwrite in it, we actually ended up announcing a new offering for Appwrite functions. And so to improve the developer experience of Appwrite functions, what we did was we created a local development solution that allows you to, well, build Appwrite functions locally, of course. That's something we had beforehand anyway, which is made easier with our CLI. But also, you can now test your functions locally, because in the past, you have to have a separate staging project for you to deploy and test. To make that simpler, you can now just do it with the CLI. And so what I'm going to be doing today as we go forward is I am going to build an Appwrite function using our Node.js runtime, which acts as a URL shortener. We'll use the Appwrite database, we'll use Appwrite functions, and we will create a URL shortener that essentially allows you to shorten. It creates a shortcode and it acts as a path for your function URL. So you can then use your function to redirect people to your longer URL, which I think is a fun little tool to show some of the capabilities of Appwrite. In the meantime, if someone does want to read about how we've implemented app local development, you can check the Appwrite website for more information. All of this is available on the website now. Now, in order to set up local development, the first thing that someone needs is, well, the Appwrite CLI on their local device. All of this information is available in the documentation. So if you're able to follow along on my screen, our documentation actually does have a CLI page, which I just clicked on. I'll go there once again. This has the installation script and any other necessary login details available that you can play around with. Now, one thing I will be doing here is that because some of these features were announced last week, we are yet to bring this to Appwrite Cloud. So just for the sake of this demo, what I'm going to be doing is I actually am going to be using a server that has been prepared and developed for the Appwrite team right now. And this is what I'll be using to test the Appwrite functions offering here for us. Also, I do have the Appwrite CLI installed on my device already, but you can go ahead and set it up using the command here on, well, in the documentation. So I'm going to go ahead, go to my CLI. We'll zoom in here a little bit, but I do actually have the CLI installed. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to log in here first. Now, what we've done with the Appwrite CLI is you can log into as many accounts as you like. I'm going to switch this account to my, to the test server that I have set up. And what I will do here is I will initialize a project on Appwrite. The way I do that is by using the Appwrite init project command. And what this does is it allows me to either create a new project or link an existing one to the directory I'm working in. I'm going to create a new project here within one of the organizations I have set up. We'll call this Believe in Serverless. I think that's a cool name. You can also set an ID for the project, which is particularly handy when you go ahead and build applications with Appwrite. I'll call it, we'll also call it Believe in Serverless, because why not? It's a nice name. And so once that's done, you saw that I had my Appwrite project open already, right? Wait, let me close that. When I reload my screen here, actually, you're going to be able to see this project here. And this is the project we'll be working in. This features all the different Appwrite products that I talked about earlier, like authentication, databases, functions, messaging, storage, and all that. There's a little setup page. We're not too worried about this because once we develop the function, we'll be able to directly operate within our functions offering as we have it right now. What I'm going to do now is, since we set a project, I am going to initialize my function now. What I'm going to call this is, since I mentioned it's a URL shortener, I'm going to call this URL shortener. The ID that I'll keep for this is URL-short. We do have a number of runtimes available for Appwrite. Actually, we have Node.js, PHP, Ruby, Python, Dart, Bun. We just announced Golang. And we do have a few others like C++, Java, Kotlin, Swift, .NET, and so on as well. I am going to use the Node 18 runtime at the moment, though. Now, once this is done, this should ideally set up the function within our directory here, which we can see. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up in VS Code now, just to walk us through what the structure of an Appwrite function looks like. Now, when we look at an Appwrite function, when we initialize the project, it created an Appwrite JSON file, which defines any resources we have pulled from this particular server here, or from this particular project here, from our Appwrite instance. And so this right now includes the details of the function we created. However, if later on you set up any database, storage buckets, or any other resources, they will all be available within the Appwrite JSON file, and you'll be able to synchronize them across your project, between your project and your local instance here. And right now, it's created this function for us as well. So we see a structure where it's provided us with the README about how you can consume this function. We have the package.json file. We also have our function available in this main.js file within the source folder. And so what this function will do is it initializes our Appwrite SDK with the client available. We've actually simplified the developer experience of Appwrite functions a lot recently. So we have environment variables inbuilt within our runtimes, which will provide you your endpoint, your project ID, and we also now send a dynamic API key through to your project, to your function on every single call. And this key is provisioned and deprovisioned every single time a request runs, which is great because it definitely adds a layer of security. And this key is actually essential in consuming any Appwrite services on a server-side environment. We do have a different client-side environment, which lets you authenticate via each user and user sessions. But for server-side applications, the API key is a great way to achieve the same things. I'm going to remove some of these comments for now. But so this is basically what we have here. We have a client initialized. After that, we do have a test function, which checks for a list of all the users within this particular project that we have. And it returns an error, or rather logs an error. All of these are actually provided as a part of our function context within Appwrite functions, which offers you information about your request, which will provide you a body, headers, and all of these necessary details. It also provides a logger and an information logger and an error logger. So that makes the experience of building particularly handy. Additionally, you can send requests to a specific path, and you can send responses as a text, a JSON, a binary, which is something we recently brought if you need to return any binary data like a stream or an array buffer. So if you want to return, for example, an image through Appwrite or any other such file, you can do that now. You can also return an empty response or a redirect for any URL, which is something that's particularly essential for us. And that is something we're going to be using later today. Now, what we're going to be doing here is, well, I think we should probably start by, well, testing this particular function. And what I'm going to do now is I am actually going to locally run this for us. For that, what I'll do is I'll use the Appwrite run function command. And this will let us set up a local image for our function, build it, and then we can, well, test it. So if suppose I take my local URL, and I do have an HTTP, well, a testing integration here. I'm actually going to zoom out a little bit to make it easier to see. And we're going to send this a GET request here. This will send us a response that we had set up here, right? Now, it also gave us an error because the API, our SDK client here tried to consume the user's API to get a list, but we didn't have the relevant scope set up, which is not a problem. It is something we will quickly set up after this. And this is where the Appwrite.json is going to become essential for us. So I'm going to go ahead to my Appwrite.json, and we needed the users.read scope. I am going to add just that right now. Now, if there was a change made within the function itself, in the code, it would have actually hot reloaded the function. Unfortunately, this is the change outside. So I'm going to have to, well, stop our function here and run it once again. But with that said, we've now sent this scope. And so this scope is applied to the dynamic API key that we're using and testing with. And this is great because we're able to consume this within local development as well, not just on a finally deployed API. Right. And so we have been able to set this up now. Now, if I send this a request, it tells us that we have a total users number of 0, which is accurate because we don't have any users. But suppose I go ahead and I add a user to this project. So I'm going to call them Walter O'Brien. We'll add an email. We'll let the phone number and a password be for now. Passwords are not mandatory for Appwrite Auth because we do have a passwordless methods available as well. So I'm going to create this user. And so now suppose if I go back and I send the same request, we now see a total users count of 1 instead of 0, which I think is great. Additionally, I showed that we had set up a path here. So requests sent to a specific path can also be used well to return specific responses. And I am going to go ahead and well send a specific request to the path ping. Now, if I do that, what this should return is a simple text pong. Let's do that now. And there we go. So that's a brief on how Appwrite functions work. Now, I think what we can do is we can start building our URL shortener function. So for that, I am going to remove some of the code that we have available here already. By the way, just as a disclaimer, what I'll be building is a very rough edged version of what this app would look like, just in the interest of time. So I might, well, skew on certain practices, but I will say just please don't mind because that is meant just, well, in the interest of the live stream. Ideally, please do use better code separation and well, error handling practices. That's a disclaimer I'll give just for now. But in the meantime, let me tell you what I'll be doing for this application here for now. So to start off, what we'll do is step 1. I am going to prepare our database. Right, because we want to be able to store these shortened URLs somewhere. So I'm going to prepare a database first. Second thing, we'll create, well, a request that allows us to, we'll make sure that it's only on post requests. Do we really add any information to the database? So the second step will be post request to save short URL. And third, get request to retrieve the long URL, right? So that's going to be how we set up our steps for now. Now, in order to do that, what we need to do here is we need to initialize the databases, our databases service here essentially. So I'm going to call this step 1. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to prepare our databases service from our SDK, which I imported here. We will then use this to create a database. And what I'll do is I am going to use the database services. The database services has a create function, and this lets us create a database and with an ID, a name. So what I'll do is, I think I'll mandatorily call this, well, URL DB. The name is going to be URL database, and that'll create a database for us. I will block these around try catch. Well, I'll add try catch blocks to this once we're done creating this. Next up, we want to create a collection. Now, collections and databases here work similar as well. A collection is the equivalent of a table. Uh, if you're used to relational databases, that's effectively how it would work. So then I'm going to go ahead. I'll create a collection. We'll use the database's ID here. Secondly, we want to add a collection ID, which in this case we can add as URLs. You can also name this anything else you'd like. You can create environment variables for the same as well. That is entirely your choice. URL collection is a good name. And so for any collections, you can actually set a series of permissions, which is great if you're consuming this collection directly from a client application. Because we're using the API key, we use the scopes instead of permissions. Permissions are typically based on specific users, like if it's a guest or if it's anyone or it's a kind of a user, or if you want to assign permissions to a specific user, that's where permissions becomes handy to add, read, write, restrictions. Document security is another addition there, if you see, which essentially allows you to set specific permissions for a document instead of the collection. Otherwise, by default, there are collection level permissions instead of document. However, since we're using this from the server-side SDK, it's not something we need to worry too much about. So we'll let it be for now. This will create our collection for us. After that, now what we also want to do is we want to create two attributes. So the first attribute we'll have, it'll be a string type attribute. String attribute, which uses the database ID, the collection ID. The key can be, short. However, that's Copilot for IntelliSense or Copilot for us. Next, we want to add a size to this particular attribute. We'll set the size as 255. This is a mandatory required attribute, so we're going to set it as true. And because it is mandatorily required, we don't need to set a default string for us. It's not an array type either, and we're okay without encryption. So we'll let those be. Next, I'm going to create another string type attribute, and we'll call it long for now. Now, this isn't one, I think we can leave it at 255 characters for now, but you can change the size of this if you'd like. In fact, if you want to just keep it different, I'll keep it 2000 for now. And the last thing we need to do is we need to create an index, because we want to make sure that these are added uniquely so that we're not repeating any of these, any piece of data. We don't want the same short URL added again and again. So we can actually create an index as well within the Appwrite database, where we use the database ID. We then use the collection ID. We'll set our key to short. We can keep it for short because we want only one short path mentioned in there. We don't need all the, we can have multiple long URLs. We just need one shortened URL. The type for this, actually, that's a good point. We do have types available within the Appwrite SDK. So the type for this is going to be unique. And the attribute we want to set this to is short. So it is an array type. And you can add more than one here, but we're okay with just short. You can also set the order, but that's not something we're too worried about. So whether it's an ascending order or descending, it's not something we're too worried for this index. And so I'm going to let it be for now. Now I will add this to a try catch block. And that's simply because if we create this function again and again, or we run this function again and again, we don't want it to keep throwing errors either, which we might do in the testing of this function right now. So I am going to log it as an error, but that's not something we need to worry about. It's only going to really hit errors if we create it again and again and again. Also, because we are going to need certain scopes set for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to our Appwrite.json, and we'll add a few other scopes actually now. So we need the collections write, the collections read, we need the documents write and read for sure. We don't need the collections read actually, considering we're just directly creating them. We need the databases write. And I think for now, that should be good enough. So this is step one. Step one is going to create and prepare our database for us. Now, if we want to test this, actually, we can get this function running once again. That will get us going. And so you can see now that we're sending all the appropriate scopes in. That being said, I am seeing a certain error out of the blue, which is a little bit surprising to me. So I'm going to go ahead and actually, let me figure out how we can sort this out. See, this is why we pray to the demo gods for every single little session that we might have. Ooh, that had it working. So we're good. I'm going to send this a little request now, just to this particular function. We're not going to get any response here for sure. It's going to send an error as well because there is a return statement missing. However, considering the rest of the function, and we should see a database here, which we do. We should also see a couple of attributes, which if we look at, we can see the size is 255. We can see the size is 2000, and we should have an index, which is great. Now, that error for the missing return statement is nothing to worry about, something we can deal with because we're going to have return statements later anyway. Now, as the second step, step two, what we want to do now is we want to, well, get a message from our request. We want to get the short and the long URLs from our request body, and we want to add them to our database. And incidentally, I like how, Copilot just helps out a little bit there. Yes, so we're going to check for the request method to be post. We want our short and our long string from the request body. The cool thing now, by the way, is that here actually this gives us a lot of information. And we want to create a document here with the database ID, the collection ID. We also need an ID for this, the string for sure. You know what we can do here actually? We can probably work without that short ID as well. But now that we've added it, it's going to be an extra piece of information. But if you haven't done this, we can actually just go ahead and remove that attribute. And we can treat our short ID as, the short URL we get can be the ID for this document. I'm going to go ahead and make that change in the collection now as well, where I'm going to remove this for now. It's something we're not going to need going ahead anyway. So we're okay on that. We're going to treat the shortened URL, the path that we have, as well the ID for this particular document. And we want to return this record or the document that we receive. So wait, actually I'm going to rename this to document just for my own peace of mind. And we can return this JSON. So we're going to use our functions here. Let's see if this works now for a quick request. It is hot reloading, so ideally this should work. So if suppose I go and I make a request here, for the short URL for now, let's add Appwrite. And for the long, it's just a path. The short field is just a path, because we're going to use the function URL to redirect. And so here I'm going to add the Appwrite website. So if I send this request now, it shows us an error. Why do we see this error here? We didn't have the database ID defined somewhere else. I'm going to do a quick little thing here. We'll say database ID as URL DB. I'll also add the constant for collection ID here. And then we can actually use these fields directly. So with that, the function should work for us. So now when we send it, you can see that it's added a document to the Appwrite database. That's what the response looks like. And if I go back to Appwrite here to check if we're getting this response and whether it exists, we can see that we have a document now, which is great because this solves step 2 for us. Now for step 3, we want to make sure that we accept a GET request to retrieve the long URL. And we redirect our user from this. So for that, I'm going to define step 3 here. Let's see what we get. It is close, but not entirely. So first of all, we'll check whether the request method is get. Since I want to take this as a part of my path, what I'm going to do is I'll just first, get our path from the request itself. And short, let's hope that, this works for us. But if not, you can also, use string, you can use string modulation or string functions as well. Get a substring of it. So a safer way actually to get this substring here for us, we can use the substring function to, get the path. I am actually, that's what I'm going to do. The first character of the path is always going to be our slash. So this is going to give us the rest of the substring, which is good enough for us. Now, what we then want to do is we'll use our databases service to get back the document with this specific ID, right? And we're going to redirect the user to this particular ID. Now, I do need to double check if the HTTP code for temporary redirects, it should be a 302. So I'm going to read. I think that's not something we're too worried about. We're okay with the redirect here. And with that said, I think we should actually be good to go to test this out. So I'm going to give it a shot right now. Just see and make sure that things are working. So now if we send it a GET request that to the Appwrite short, we can see that it's returning to us a website. So if I go to my browser now, actually, and I run this here This takes us to the Appwrite website, which is great. That's exactly what we want. We have our URL shortener function here. Amazing. Now you can obviously clean this up a little bit. What you can do is you can add a bit of error handling. If you like, that's always a good thing to have. Right. I'm going to just add a couple of responses here just in case. And we'll also add another final response. Invalid request. One cool thing that you can also do is you can actually add a status code here to the end of it. So this would be a 404. We're going to leave, we're not too worried about the responses that actually work. That's going to be a 200 on its own. This we'll just leave as a 500. And with that, we have a functioning, it's a functioning URL shortener. We actually don't need to return this here. We're going to let this one be. So I'm going to actually go ahead and deploy this to my Appwrite project now, just to make sure to see if everything's working. And so the way we do that is we're going to go ahead and use a command actually within, there is a command called Appwrite deploy function. And what this is going to do is, oh, sorry, we changed it up. It's Appwrite push function. And this will allow us to push this function to our project. So I'm going to go ahead, it's going to push it, it's going to deploy it. And so while we see that it's deploying here, you can also monitor this on the functions page for each function. And the cool thing is you can actually get build logs for this function. We can see that it's already deployed, which I think is fantastic. That was definitely quick. But you can see that the function has its domain here. We have filters to check what the source of deployment was. The deployment size can be verified as well, which is great. You can see the function domain. So if you want to attach another one, that's also possible. And we have our settings where you can add any permissions you'd like. For this, I think we want to allow anyone to really execute this function. So I'm going to add that. And we'll actually pull that access back as we try this out. You can add a schedule if you'd like to run this and trigger this function on a timer. You can add any environment variables and set a timeout, and these scopes actually, which I think is great. I do notice that these scopes weren't enabled, which might be something we need to look into. Let me actually check that once. I'm going to pull our changes. So if I look at the JSON file, let me see. Oh, I think I lost my scopes here. Anyway, that's something I just realized I think they hadn't been set up here at that point of time. So I'm going to quickly add these here once. I'll quickly update them. We already have our permission execute access set here. So, and like we saw, when we set the execute access, we pulled that, but I think we weren't able to pull the scopes at that point. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull this once again. And when we do that, we should see our scopes updated here, which they are. And that's great, I think. Now, what I'll do here is I'll actually test out this deployed function as well, just to make sure it's all working in order. Now, obviously, because we didn't really set anything for an empty GET request, it's not going to return us. But if I add Appwrite here, it should redirect us to the Appwrite website. And it does, which is great. Our URL shortener is working, and that is what I had for my demo today. Now, I would definitely appreciate if folks give this a try. We've got the Appwrite website here. You can get started by clicking on this button. It'll take you to Appwrite Cloud. So you'll be able to explore any Appwrite offerings available right now. And some of our new services like local development, the new CLI is already available. However, we'll be bringing these to Appwrite Cloud very soon. So thanks a lot. I think that was good for my demo. Daniel, it'd be great to have you back here. I think you're muted.
I should unmute myself. Yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. That's quite the ecosystem. How long has Appwrite been around for?
So it started as an open source project in 2019. Just before, I think sometime end of 2020 is when it became a company. And so we're going to turn 4 very soon as a company. I've been around Appwrite since September of 2021. So I am actually about to complete 3 years at Appwrite in 2 days.
That's awesome. I guess before I ask my questions, let's prompt chat to see if anyone that's watching has any questions. I didn't see any yet, but I'll give people a few seconds.
That's all right.
Yeah, I don't see any questions from the chat. I think I had some, though, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so regarding working with multiple people on an Appwrite project, I saw like the poll, that looked pretty slick. Is that Git-based? And like if there's conflicts, what does that look like?
So for Appwrite, the pull function that we have, it's similar to the Git flow. What we've done is it directly pulls information from your Appwrite project. So whatever is up on your instance can be pulled, whatever is on your local device can be pushed. That is something you can do. We do have a Git integration available for functions. It is limited to GitHub right now. However, we hopefully will extend that to other Git-based platforms in the future. But I do think there's a little more time for that to go. So for functions specifically, we do have a GitHub integration. What that allows you to do is it lets you implement CI/CD out of the box. So you could commit to GitHub, and then that's gonna pull changes. And we use GitHub's webhooks for that. Essentially, you can create a GitHub app, and we use webhooks for that specifically.
Nice.
So that is possible for functions. The rest of it, though, it's basically the CLI communicating with the project via APIs. But it was intended to feel similar to the Git flow, so that the developers are already used to that workflow.
Yeah. I think that's what I liked about it. Was it seemed familiar. People like what's familiar, but that can be a dangerous trap too. Awesome.
You're absolutely right. But I think because it's modeled similar to how Git works, I feel like that's a flow that is going to be comfortable for most people. And so when there are conflicts, we're typically able to catch that. So the CLI will represent if any changes that you're pushing forward or pulling as well.
Very cool. And then another question that I had was, what's things that you can share that are publicly information? What's some of the neatest things that you've seen people build with Appwrite?
Ooh, that's a great question. So I think one of my favorite things that I do at Appwrite is that I work with some of our I don't want to say craziest, but they are some of our craziest and our best developers in our community. And we've actually built a set of case studies, which I can share if you don't mind. So if I bring up my screen once again.
I can pull that up here.
Yep. So we've actually seen some very interesting applications. Like, I think SmartBee was one of those extremely fascinating solutions because they've actually used multiple self-hosted instances of Appwrite at different mining operations and connected them with various IoT sensors to track gas levels and so on and collate all of that information at a further remote server later on. And they're working with a massive amount of data every single day, every single week, every single month. And so SmartBee was a particularly fascinating solution that I was able to interact with. My Jupyter was again very fascinating. I think it was also among the first conventionally funded startups that we interacted with. And what they've done is they've tried to solve the problem of people not being able to get the correct shoe size for shoes they order online. And what they're doing is that, they built an ML based or an AI based solution that lets you click a picture of your foot kept on an A4 sheet of paper and predict your shoe size from that. And they've been working with several different platforms to support that. Um, OpenMind was actually fascinating as well because OpenMind built an application in collaboration with a popular YouTuber in Germany. I hope Germany was where that was. I do believe so. To help create more information and education about different psychoactive pharmaceuticals and drugs so that people are able to ensure that they're not consuming improperly and um, they're they also had activities that people could participate to ensure that they are sober at any given time, which I think was great. I think we're seeing some really wholesome solutions. LangX was fascinating. They built a language learners community. So if people from learning different languages want to communicate with other people and interact with each other and learn from each other, that's a great way to do it. Undo is working in the asset management space, and they've created um, a platform for circular business solutions, which are businesses more engaged in eco-friendly practices like more usable and recyclable apparel, for example. And so they've built a full platform to help manage their products and their logistical and supply chain workflow. So we've seen some fascinating applications in our community that have been growing so well. I feel like I could talk about all of these. K-Collect was a platform for K-pop fans to manage their um, K-pop cards. They had something like cards. I think I have not been a part of the K-pop ecosystem, but they built a massive consumer base with over 50, 60,000 people. Magic Kids built an audio-based content platform so that kids can have audio storytelling and healthier meditation exercises that their parents can deliver or their teachers can deliver. So all of these had such fascinating solutions, and we're only seeing more and more of these come out through Appwrite's community. It's just I'm always very proud to talk about any of them.
Yeah, that's super interesting stuff. Yeah, it's like stuff that seems like, like your shoes don't fit. Like it's not like a super flashy problem, but it's a problem that a lot of people have.
It's a real problem.
And
Absolutely.
I feel like when companies go after that type of problem, I'm super interested. And yeah, that's wildly cool that they were able to build all this with Appwrite.
Yeah. It's just I think it's always fascinating to see how people can use it because Appwrite is a very flexible platform in the sense that you can really fit an Appwrite at any point of your development workflow. If you don't want to use storage or database, but you just want authentication, you can do that. If you don't need any of these, but you want to implement serverless functions, you can do that. That's why Appwrite is such a special platform. It doesn't force you to implement any of these, and really, you can use it in whatever way you like. It's meant to fit your development process, and I think that in itself has allowed us to work with more and more developers. It's definitely something that allows us to interact with more of them. Um, and I think I'm always fascinated to see how people use it and build it. It's just special for that to happen.
I think major bonus points from devs for it being open source too, because
absolutely.
I mean, if I'm using Appwrite and something's broken, I love being able to just get in the weeds and try to fix it myself. And it's nice to be able to do that because then you can give back to the community, and it's just
Honestly, I think a
yeah.
big part of our engineering team till this day is still people who were contributing to Appwrite in some form of the or the other. So we still have a lot of people who've been hired because they were heavily actively contributing to our community, and we like to find ways to reward those efforts.
Yeah, those are the best employees to have, in my opinion. People that are already sold on the mission, have used the thing, and yeah, that's amazing. Where's your contributors mostly from, or is it like all over the world?
It's very distributed. Like I think as a company, we're about 33 or 34 people now, but that's from 15 or 16 countries, if I'm not wrong. So we're very distributed. And I think on GitHub, we've probably over our different repositories and organization got over 800 contributors now. I don't think I can count where they're all from. It's very distributed,
Yeah.
and I think that's such an exciting thing to have for a community to be that diverse. To see so many different people from different backgrounds and experiences and walks of life. I learn so much every single time I'm interacting with them. That's one of those pros of being in developer relations as well, is that you're always learning from people around you.
Yeah, different perspectives. And I mean, even just being born and living in a different country can provide drastically different
Absolutely.
perspectives. I love it. Very awesome. All right. Last chance for folks watching if you want to ask a question. Otherwise,
I think even if people don't have a question right now, but they want to reach out later, my Twitter handle is mentioned right there. That's a good place to catch me.
cool.
Apple's also fairly active across our socials. Our Twitter is heavily active. We also have a Discord community where we're constantly interacting. So those are all great spots to interact with our community. We also do weekly office hours on every Thursday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. So if someone has any doubts about Appwrite and instead of messaging, they just want to join and have a chat with the team, that is something they can do any Thursday. And we're there every single Thursday without fail. If there is an exceptional Thursday where we might be out, which can happen when the team does their little catch up once a year or so on. We do inform in advance, but even without that, our team, our community is so active on Discord. I think we're definitely lucky to have such an engaging and such a wonderful community all throughout. So that Discord is one of the best places to catch us. And I think what I can do is I can quickly update that in my headline. Actually, I'm just going to go and do that. So if someone does want to go there, that's the link, appwrite.io/Discord.
Awesome. Yeah, I can mention that in the Believe in Serverless Discord as well,
Awesome.
if someone wants to.
Yeah, no, I think that'd be great.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing. If you haven't tried out Appwrite, I would definitely encourage you to check it out. I've definitely have this on my to-do list to take a look at. So, but otherwise, thanks for joining us. Happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Guess I'll wave goodbye now and end the stream. Thanks for joining, y'all.
Take care, everyone. Thanks a lot, Daniel. And I hope to catch up sometime again.
Yeah, of course, definitely.